Coming up on this episode, the Warriors sign a 6'8 sharpshooter previously with the Lakers, show interest in a former Warrior and 2015 NBA champion, and outlining one pivotal question for every potential Warriors starter entering training camp. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Hope you're all having a good week. I am battling a cold at the moment, and so if I look and sound different, it's because I'm quite nasally, and so I apologise if this is a bit more difficult to listen to than normal, but hopefully by next episode I'll be over it. Kind of been a 2-3 day thing at the moment. Not really resting too much, just trying to keep active and do what I normally do, but it's certainly impacting me a little bit. Anyway, doesn't matter. On last episode, I went through the Warriors 21-man roster for training camp, or at least what I thought was going to be the 21-man roster for training camp. Of course, that is what the limit that you are allowed per the CBA rules. And yet the Warriors continue to make moves after that. So they've now got 22 plus Quinton Post, who there's still been no confirmation on that as of yet, aside from Anthony Slater of The Athletic reporting yesterday that Post is still expected to be on a two-way contract at the start of the season, and that as a result, Golden State will have to move on from one of their current two-way contracted players in Pat Spencer, Daquan Plowden, and I think most likely to face the axe is Reese Beekman in order to make room for Post. But they are still making moves, other moves in the meantime. Yesterday, we had the report that the Warriors are signing 6'8 sharpshooter Blake Hinson to an Exhibit 10 contract. So over the past week, we've now had Yuri Collins, Javen Johnson, Dante Scott, and now Blake Hinson after Jackson Rowe also signed a training camp or Exhibit 10 contract immediately after Summer League in July. So that's now 5 players reported to have been signed to an Exhibit 10 contract, which is one more than the Warriors can probably have, given they've got 14 on the main roster, 3 on two-way contracts, and then you'd assume 4 to fill out the 21-man roster for training camp and preseason. But Hinson is certainly perhaps the most intriguing. He's the only one of these 5 that haven't had previous experience with the Warriors, whether that be in the G League with Santa Cruz or in Summer League. So Hinson went undrafted in June's NBA draft, immediately signed a two-way contract with the Lakers, played for the Lakers in Summer League. Wasn't great. The shooting splits weren't good. I think it was like 34% from the field, 32% from three-point range. So not ideal there. But it looks like he was only waived by the Lakers just days ago, earlier in the week. And the Warriors, very, very quick by the look of it, to snap him up and say, yep, thanks, we'll take you. Put you on an Exhibit 10 contract. Again, with these guys, most likely just a way for the Warriors to get them on the Santa Cruz roster, given there's that incentive for players to stick around, that $75,000 financial incentive for players to stick around with the G League affiliate if they're waived by the main team. So Hinson certainly intriguing, like that size and shooting ability. If you go back to his college days last season, he led the ACC in three-point shooting, 42.1% from deep on nearly 8 attempts per game. That's a lot. That's a lot of attempts, particularly in college basketball, where you play 8 minutes less. Quite extraordinary. Averaged 18.5 points and 4.4 rebounds per game. Had a full 4-year college career, I think, or maybe even 5-year. I think he's 24 years old already, similar to Post, obviously. So certainly a fascinating player to watch, I think, out of all these guys, simply because of the fact, from a Golden State perspective, we haven't necessarily seen too much of him. We've got experience with Jackson Rowe, Yuri Collins, Javen Johnson, Dante Scott in a combination of Summer League and G League games. Hinson, a little bit different, a bit more of an unknown, and certainly that combination of size and shooting is fascinating. As one of the big points that I've been speaking about this offseason is the need for the Warriors to have more shooting in the front court. Blake Hinson could provide that, but it looks like he'll probably start out in Santa Cruz, and some impressive performances, who knows, might make his way up to the main squad at some point. There's also the report from Slater yesterday that mentioned that not only is Nazir Little, which I spoke about on last episode, not only is he been in the Warriors facility holding workouts over recent weeks, but also Justin Holiday, of course, Warriors champion in 2015, played that one season with the franchise in 2014-15. Since then has been a very good veteran wing, bounced around the league. I think he's played for about 9 different teams now, most recently with the Denver Nuggets last season. I would classify him as one of the best remaining free agents out there on the market, simply because he actually had meaningful minutes for the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs last season. Like, he had 2 games in that second round series against the Timberwolves where he scored double-digit points. And so you see a guy have an impact like that in the playoffs, you think, okay, surely he's going to get another opportunity elsewhere. But of course, he's 35 years old now. And I don't know, I doubt it's going to be with the Warriors again. That plethora of, 2, 3, the glut of shooting guard, small forward options that they've got on the roster already. I don't mind Justin Holiday. I think he deserves an opportunity elsewhere. This kind of prototypical 3-and-D wing. I think a lot of teams could use him. I just don't think that's necessarily the Warriors. And so again, I'm fascinated by the fact that he's there, involved with the team and in workouts and whatever else. But I just don't think for him or for the Warriors it's necessarily the most beneficial use of time when he could probably be holding workouts with other teams who are in more of a need for his type of skill set as a 3-and-D wing. And the fact that he did have impact in the playoffs, again, I think he deserves an opportunity. I just don't think that's necessarily going to come with the Warriors, particularly now. Like, they've got a 22-man roster. Sure, they could waive Guy Santos or Lindy Waters. I've had a bit of lack of clarity on the Water situation. I don't know if it's Spotrac or something else like that says that his contract has been guaranteed, but it's actually, according to Slater yesterday, it hasn't. So technically they can waive Waters or Santos before the start of the season, obviously, and sign a free agent like Holiday, Little, whoever it may be. But as Slater also pointed out yesterday, that's a high bar that they'll need to clear to be able to make that happen, because the Warriors traded for Lindy Waters. Yes, they didn't really give up anything apart from literal money to get him. Sorry. But I don't think they would have gone through the time of trading for him if they were going to not even see him in a regular season game. And then Santos as well, they've been developing over a number of years now, and I think they're going to want to see the benefits of that eventually pay off, as they did a little bit last season. So it's going to be, I'd be surprised if any moves are made on the main roster and bring in an experienced free agent. I do, just on a side point, well, it's not even a side point, it's a main point. I do find it amazing it's almost laughable now if you go back to that Waters trade and what they've done since then. So if we exclude Post out of the picture, which is maybe unfair, but if we exclude him out, because he's not actually on the roster right now, and even then he's going to be on a 2-way contract, unlikely to be in the rotation, but who knows? We'll wait and see. But if you look at like everything else, so they trade for Waters, free agency, they signed Anthony Melton, trade for Buddy Hield and Kyle Anderson in that Klay Thompson sign and trade. If you look at the guys that they've looked at in workouts, reportedly looked at in workouts over this offseason, Bruno Caboclo, Davis Bertans, Troy Brown Jr., and now Nazir Little and Justin Holiday. If you look at the guys that are on training camp contracts, Jackson Rowe, Javen Johnson, Dante Scott, Yuri Collins, and Blake Hinson, that's 14 players. What do they all have in common? They're not a genuine center. None of those guys are a genuine center. Now, at a stretch, you could say Caboclo, he played center for Brazil in the Olympics, but he's 6'9". He played the majority of his NBA career as he started as a small forward, then transitioned to a power forward. Played a little bit as center towards the end of his NBA career, but certainly more of a small ball option, that's for sure. There's no player there. So, I mean, Bertans is 6'10", doesn't really play at that size, but there's no one taller than that the Warriors have even expressed interest in out of like 14 players. That's a lot. 14 players is a lot to state, oh, we're not going to look at a genuine 7-footer. And of course, you can include Post in the mix, right? But again, he's not on a roster at the moment. He's going to be on a 2-way contract when he is. And he's a rookie. So I know fans have lamented it for a long time. Not only the Warriors' lack of size, but their lack of center depth, which I think played a big role in the fact that Loon looked so tired and weary last season. Like, I don't blame him. He was asked to play. What did he play? 250 plus straight regular season games. Like, and then, some of the stuff he was asked to in the playoffs as well. Like, the toll that's taken on his body because of the lack of other options on the roster, I think certainly impacted his year last season. And so interesting to see if he can bounce back from that now that he's kind of out of the mix again. And TJD has certainly developed, but TJD's 6'9", he's not a genuine 7-footer. I know there's this thing about, our big men, they need to be able to move, they need to be able to pass, they need to be able to, they need to have a high IQ, they need to be able to play in the Steve Kerr Golden State system. But I understand that, but at some point you also need to say, let's just get a big guy. Let's just get a 7-footer. All right, let's just at least have the option. Doesn't mean, I'm not even asking that it needs to be another 7-footer on the roster alongside Post, but even just look at someone on an Exhibit 10 contract. You've got 5 guys there. None of them are over 6'8". Just look at someone. Maybe they have brought, I'm sure they probably have brought a big man in for workouts this offseason, but it's clearly not anyone notable to the point where it's been reported. And so I don't know. I don't actually care about anyone being on the roster, but the fact they're not even expressing interest in the way of workouts or training camp contracts, that's baffling to me. It's unbelievable, and I think it would further infuriate the fan base. And the fact that I go through the 21-man roster on last episode, and it's literally only Loon and TJD as the centers out of 21 players. I mean, it's got to be frustrating, doesn't it? It has to be frustrating. Even if I think, if they start Draymond plenty at center, then, they're probably going to be okay. But again, one injury to TJD or Loon, one significant injury, and it's going to be a case of we told you so as the fan base to the franchise. Anyway, leading into training camp, of course, we've just got over a week now until the start of training camp. Looking forward to that, obviously happening in Hawaii, and then the first preseason game against the Clippers on October 5. I just wanted to go through some of the storylines, and I've posed a question for every Warriors player on the main roster entering training camp. It was published on bluemanhoop.com yesterday, I believe. I broke it up in terms of, I think there's, out of the 14 guys on the roster, there's probably 7 that I can see as potential starters in the season opener against the Trailblazers, and then the other 7 in the rotation. So I'm going to go through the first 7 now, the potential starters, and then next episode I'll also go through the rest of the rotation. So, as I said, 7 guys I think potential starters for the Warriors entering next season. Steph and Draymond probably the only 2 guarantees, and then we'll wait and see what happens from there. Let's start with Steph. Big question, obviously, the question that's going to be facing Steph Curry entering every training camp and preseason for the remainder of his career. Is there any sign of decline? Because there was last season. Now, he won Clutch Player of the Year. That was fantastic. He was still great. Don't get me wrong, he was great. But you just look at the numbers, 29.4 to 26.4 points per game, so a 3-point decrease there. Largely that came from the fact he shot worse from the floor. I think he was 49 down to 45% from the field. It was still at 40. I think he was 42 down to just above 40 from 3-point range. Still reasonable efficiency, no doubt about that. But there was a slight decline there. The rebounds and the assists per game were also down, albeit I think the assists per game probably comes down to the fact Chris Paul was there, and CP3 did play a lot of minutes alongside Steph last season. I'd probably expect the assist numbers to perhaps go back up for Steph next season with CP3 not there. But that's the question, obviously. Is there any sign of decline? And the Olympics wasn't great until the semi-final and the final, where he still showed, hey, I'm one of the best players in the world. And I still think he's a top 10 guy in the league. Now, where you want to argue him, I've seen people still say he's top 5, 6, I'd say between 5 and 10, 6, 7, 8, around that mark is probably where Steph lies. And when you've got a top 10 player in the league, you've always got a puncher's hope, really, regardless of what the rest of the roster necessarily looks like. But obviously, it's needless to say, if Steph comes out next season and isn't a top 10 player in the league anymore, then the Warriors' chance is practically zero. There's just no way that they could compete in trying to be a deep playoff team. So that is the biggest question, I suppose, facing the Warriors. Is there a sign of decline from Steph? Because if there is, as I said, their chances are practically zero. Brandon Pajemski, I think most believe, will start alongside Steph in the backcourt. So the question I've posed for him is the scoring jump visible enough to reach the lofty ambitions that he's set upon himself? Of course, had that interview with Mark Medina of Sportskeeda way back in the start of the offseason, basically talking about himself wanting to be in most improved player discussions next season, and also being noted as one of the rising stars in the league. For him to do that, clearly 9.2 points per game last season, that scoring is going to need to take a significant rise. Can he double that? Can he get to 18 points a game? At least it's got to be at least 15, probably close to 18 points a game. If you're doubling your scoring output and having a big impact on a team that hopefully gets back to the playoffs, then that could certainly put Pods in the most improved player discussion. There's no doubt about that. We saw during Summer League, he was certainly more aggressive in his shot, particularly from three-point range. He spoke about wanting to get up a heap of threes, like 6, 7, 8 threes a game next season, which I think might be slightly unrealistic. But again, that's going to be a big step, a big pathway for him to get to that 16, 18 points a game, whatever it is. So it's going to be interesting in training camp and preseason where whether or not we see, like visibly, strongly see that scoring jump or the potential of that scoring jump from Brandon Pajemski. The other guy who I think could battle for that spot in the backcourt is DeAnthony Melton. The biggest question for him, I think, is still health. So are you completely free of the back concerns that limited you to 38 games with the Philadelphia 76ers last season? He said in his introductory press conference that he is healthy, that he's fit and available, he'll be ready to go, and that was 6 weeks, a couple of months ago now. So everything seems pretty good from that perspective, but until we actually see it, and not only do I want to see him available and out there, but you've also got to see, okay, are you the same impactful, proven starting caliber player that you were with the 76ers after this back concern that really hampered you last season? So that is going to be an interesting watch. Andrew Wiggins was 2023-24, just a blip on the radar. Wiggs has averaged 16.9 points per game in all of his first 9 seasons in the league. That dropped to like 13.2 last season. Can he get back to at least 17 points a game on reasonable efficiency? Because the Warriors desperately need that from him. I don't want to speak too much about Wiggs and his expectations in training camp and preseason because of the family stuff that's been going on with him over the past week. I don't really, the expectation shouldn't necessarily be there right away, given what he's been through. JK. So JK just had a very interesting interview with Tim Kawakami, and speaking about his game and what he's been working on in the off-season, saying he's feeling confident about his three-point shot. And that is the big thing for JK. So have the skills and the game understanding improved enough to be a small ball option for Steve Kerr. That is specifically what Steve outlined after the conclusion of last season, basically stating JK is primarily a 4 at this point. He needs to improve his skills, ball handling, shooting, all that stuff, to be a legitimate small forward option. And Steve was really like, that was a question that Steve didn't have an answer to right then. So can JK come out in training camp and prove to Steve, prove to the rest of the team that, hey, I'm a small forward option. And if that's the case, if he comes out and the shooting is much more improved, the ball handling is much more improved, then all of a sudden you feel like if you're Steve, you can go to a Kuminga, Green, TJD front court, and the issues that you have in terms of balancing offense and defense aren't necessarily there if JK takes this huge leap offensively, particularly in regard to his ball handling and his shooting and his just general decision making as well. Draymond, talking of like that front court, is the body physically ready to be a starting center from opening night? So we know over pretty much the past decade that the Warriors' best lineups have always featured Draymond Green at center, but him starting the season as the center, like we've never seen that before. And you're asking a 34-year-old 6'6" guy with plenty of miles on the legs to be the starting center from opening night. If that's the case, I've said that it's completely unsustainable, I think, over the course of an entire season. And yes, you can do it here and there, and you can close lineups like that. You can close games like that, that's for sure. But necessarily starting games, I don't necessarily want to see it, but I actually don't know what the alternative is if if Kuminga's not proving to be a small forward option and he's a power forward, but he's also still too good not to start, then I don't know what the alternative is here, and that's going to be one of the biggest issues for Steve and the Warriors in training camp. So, Draymond, physically, how are you looking? Are you looking capable of being able to battle against 7-foot guys on a nightly basis throughout the season? I think it's a tough ask to ask him to do that personally, and I'm sure plenty would agree. And then TJD, of course, is the other guy that, again, I think it'd be an ideal scenario if we can get to a situation where a JK, Draymond, TJD front court is viable. And I'm sure we'll probably see that lineup at stages throughout preseason to see what happens. But for TJD, is there something to suggest more than just a solid role player? So hugely impressive rookie season, no doubt about that. I think based on what he did last season, he looks like a 10, 12-year player in the NBA already. Like, I could almost pencil him in for that. But he's still got limited upside. He's 6'9". He's already 24 years old. He didn't show any sign of a jump shot last season. So to me, those three things, or those two things particularly in terms of 6'9" and no jump shot, like you can't be a star, right, doing that. And so is there something else? Does he bring something else to the table next season, or in training camp, in preseason, that we didn't see last season in terms of a jump shot? Maybe it's like ball handling a little bit. I don't know. But is there something else here that suggests, hey, this guy's more than just a solid role player who's going to average 20, 25 minutes a game? He's like 30 minutes. I'm not going to label like future all-star or anything like that, but like high-end, like $25, $30 million guy on his next contract, which is still a few years away. But I am interested to see, because as much as I love TJD, I still think he is limited somewhat, and therefore, is there something you can bring to the table to show me otherwise in training camp and preseason? So looking forward to that. Other than that, guys, they are my 7 potential starters: Steph, Pods, Melton, Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond, and TJD. And the big question marks surrounding each of them entering training camp and preseason. I'll finish it up there. I need to probably go and blow my nose. Sorry for the information. Struggling a little bit, but we'll see how we go over the rest of the weekend. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. And until next episode, have a great rest of your weekend.